Okay, so what we're looking at here is a typical NS14 mainsail. Now, since the last 10-15 years, the class has progressed to these large-headed sails. Now, they've changed the dynamics of the NS14 rig compared to a lot of other classes. So, if you've come from another class, you may have to relearn what you've learnt in a previous life. Now, the tips of these masts are also relatively stiff for their size, and that's in order to hold up that upper leach tension. Now, I'm holding a small amount of tension there, and you can see the head of the mainsail is fallen open, and it's not going to set you up for maximum power. You'll have problem pointing, and it's not as most efficient for upwind sailing. You find as I pull a bit of sheet tension on, a well-designed sail will stand up, and what you're looking for there is a nice straight leach with an even curve through to the head, and to make sure that you've got the least drag profile, and you can fine-tune and really use that small sail area we've got as most efficiently as you can. Now, once you've got too much sail, you need to somehow to be able to flatten it out and take some power out of it. Now, your two primary controls for flattening out an NS14 mainsail are your Vang and your Cunningham. Now, if we pull on some Vang, firstly, Hugh, you can see what the Vang actually does initially is pulling down on the leach of the mainsail, but it's actually bending the mast. And similar to how the jib was flattened by pulling out the forestay with tension, the mast pulling out has flattened the mainsail. Now, if Hugh also pulls on Cunningham now, you can see the tip is bending off even further, and the head of the mainsail is getting even flatter. Now, that's without me changing the mainsail the sheet tension. Just a little bit of change of sheet tension, you can see what the Vang's also done. It's now doing all that work that I had of pulling on that mainsail and holding the leach up. Now, if I just tie that off there, the other thing you want to be looking at is what happens when this big-headed sail that I talked about begins to operate on the mast through these battens. As you can see, it really has a massive hinging effect and results in all of the luff round your sailmaker's designed into the sail being pulled out. And you can see the batten actually ends up popping and reversing, which is the equivalent of over-vanging. So the development of the sails has got to the point where we know for your crew weight, we know for your type of mast, the amount of rig tension, etc. We know how this head will respond before it pops on you. That happens on the water. If you see someone going uphill with the head cycling in and out, either it's blowing 40 knots or they really need to do a little bit of work on their sails to make sure that they blade out nice and flat so you can spill as much air out of the head of the sail and then progressively through the rig as you go. What we're looking at here is the effects of the controls on the position of the draft, which is the maximum depth of the sail, and where it appears in the sail according to what lines you pull on the boat. Now, the Cunningham and the Vang work in conjunction with setting the depth of the sail. The Cunningham and the rotator work in conjunction to set the position of the draft of your sail. Now, at a standard setting like this, which would be a moderate air hiking sort of a setting, you can see the draft in this sail is sitting somewhere around about 40% back, which would be very close to the design of the sail from the sailmaker, possibly a little far aft, depending on the conditions. Now, if you wish to pull the draft a little bit further forward, at a setting like this, it's as simple as just pulling on the Cunningham. And you can see as Hugh pulls the Cunningham on, keep pulling, there you go. You can see now your depth of maximum position has moved forward quite dramatically, okay? And that's without changing anything else on the boat, but just pulling on your Cunningham. Where this can be effective is, again, similar to the jib powering it up, is lumpy water and keeping that draft forward. But at the same time, it's really effective in spilling open the head of the sail, because as you've moved the draft forward, there's less support on the leach and the head falls off, which when you're overpowered, really makes a difference of being able to hold the boat upright.